everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, the TitanHQ State of Email Security in 2025 Annual Report Launch. My name is Treva Stankard, and I'm your moderator today. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping notes. The webinar is being recorded and the recording will be sent out afterwards. Any questions we don't get to, we will contact you directly. Thank you all so much for joining today. We're so excited to have you here with us for this session. Today, we're diving into the findings of our brand new research study. Michael Sampson and Sean Morris are going to break down the key findings from this research and share some eye-opening insights on the state of email security. They'll dive into what these findings really mean for SMBs right now and what we should be watching out for in the year ahead when it comes to email security trends. It's going to be an insightful discussion, so stay tuned. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce to you our speakers. Michael Sampson is the Principal Analyst at Osterman Research with a broad interest in cybersecurity, data protection, and information governance. Sean Morris is the CTO at TitanHQ with the responsibility of leading TitanHQ's product management, technology delivery, customer support, and security IT operations teams. Sean, Michael, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Great to be here.
Good to be here. Thank you.
I'll hand over to you guys.
Thank you. Sean, do you want to make any opening comments, or do you want me to just dive straight into what we've been working on together?
No, Michael, you get going and I'll jump in straight after.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, thank you for the introduction. It's great to be here and welcome everyone to this webinar. If you haven't heard of Osterman Research, we're a market research company focused on crafting insightful research that impacts organizations. We've had the privilege of working with TitanHQ on their brand new report, The State of Email Security in 2025. And my understanding is that you will be able to get a copy of this within 48 hours of the webinar. So look out for you in your inbox for that coming imminently. Let me tell you about the research that we did in order to inform this year's research study. We ran a survey of 252 organizations in the United States. In order to take the survey, respondents needed to be a security leader responsible for email security at their organization. The majority of the respondents that took the survey by design worked at organizations of 100 to 1,000 employees, and then the around 20% of respondents worked at an MSP or a managed service provider. We were very interested in this research and looking at the small and medium-sized business market, which is why we concentrated on less than 1,000 employees. The survey was cross-industry, so there were no industry restrictions or exclusions in the data that we gathered. Here's some top-level data points that I'll just talk through very quickly. 79% of the respondents experienced at least one type of cybersecurity incident related to email in the previous 12 months. The most common incident type was compromised credentials via phishing, and compromised credentials through phishing has been a very common attack type for a long time, and I'm sure Sean, before today's webinar is finished, will talk a lot more about that. 56% of respondents expect the threat level of BEC, or business email compromise, to increase and get worse over the coming 12 months. 93% of respondents say that email is an ever-changing threat that requires them to stay on top of the changing threat landscape. AI is noted as the most impactful innovation to email security, and on average, across a variety of threat types that we asked about, 77% expect threat dynamics to get worse or stay the same over the next 12 months. Let's dive into some of the specific details, starting with assessing the threat landscape for email. If we think about the last 12 months in terms of cybersecurity, slightly more generally, there's been a year of mammoth incidents and data breaches. The National Public Data Organization was compromised of 270 million, had a compromise that affected 270 million people in the United States. And something like 3 billion records were compromised in that attack. That organization, National Public Data, went out of business as a result of that breach. You will, of course, seen all of the headlines around the Snowflake compromises that affected a whole suite of very large organizations. You probably heard about the deepfake video meeting attack against Arup and the $25 million that was wired to a bank account controlled by the threat actors. And then finally, just for today, MediSecure is an organization in Australia. They had a compromise as well that affected 13 million people, or half of the population of Australia. Now, I know I said that MediSecure was going to be the last one, but we can't jump off this slide until we talk about new AI-enabled cyber attacks and the growth in those over the last 12 months. And that has been a recurring theme that we have seen across multiple research studies that we've done at Osterman Research, and will also be something that we talk about in our webinar today. When we queried respondents around the security incident types that they had experienced over the previous 12 months, the most common was employee credentials compromised via a phishing attack. The second most common type was breach of sensitive employee data. And of course, when you think about employee credentials compromised via a phishing attack, it makes a whole lot of sense that one of the immediate consequences of that would be the breach of sensitive employee data, as those credentials are then used to get access to data that the employee has. There were other types of compromise as well. So in third was compromised by an attack impersonating a trusted customer or business partner. In fourth was employee credentials compromised through a QR code phishing attack, a attack vector or avenue that we saw becoming increasingly common in 2024, as well as employee credentials compromised even though they were protected by MFA or multi-factor authentication. And it's the rise of these phishing attacks with phishing toolkits that have MFA bypass capabilities built in that has made this increasingly worrisome to organizations. Overall, in terms of the incident types that we asked about, and it was types of incidents rather than incident count as such, 79% of respondents said they had experienced at least one type of incident over the previous 12 months, and half of respondents had experienced between 2 and 4 different incident types. Sean, when you look at this data, is there anything that stands out to you?
Yeah, it's interesting. And certainly, even just going back to your previous slide, Michael, even this weekend, the news broke about the Oracle and their breach with 6 million cloud records affecting 140,000 customers. Now, not if you like, I suppose, acknowledged yet fully by Oracle, but the scale and impact from their SaaS and cloud footprint is pretty staggering. So the trend continues, I guess, is probably the best way to describe that. We just adding a comment here around the general industry trends, and I think this slide really summarizes really well a lot of the core techniques. But there's certainly, it seems from our perspective, to be a trend, even more heavily into social engineering, and with a focus on how to divert financial transactions. I mean, the focus in the cyber kind of criminal fraternity has been typically towards ransomware in the past. It seems to be shifting and shifting strongly towards how to divert a financial transaction, because in many respects, there's less drama from their perspective. They can execute the crime, take the money, and move on without having to worry about, troublesome negotiations and whether or not you've got cyber insurance and all these other factors that have an implication for how much will get paid. They can just have you pay money to them. They can rinse and repeat that at will and quite quickly.
Thank you. Yes, I was reading an interesting report from an insurance provider today around all of those dynamics, but we'll have to have that conversation another day, Sean. The threat landscape is getting worse. We asked respondents to give us an assessment of how they saw a variety of attack types changing over the coming 12 months. The attack type that they saw getting worse the most was phishing. In second place was use of compromised email accounts from supply chain or business partners. And third was the use of generative AI and attacks to increase plausibility. And fourth was attacks using credentials that have already been compromised. So in this case, it would be finding or buying access to compromised credentials on the dark web and then using those to compromise the organization rather than starting with a phishing attack. And then in fifth place was the concern that deepfake attacks was going to get worse across the next 12 months. Now, on average, across the 10 or so different types of attack types that we asked about, 77% expected threat dynamics across those to remain the same or get worse. In all situations, Sean, when we asked about this, it was over half who said it was going to get worse, and then the difference was made up by those saying that it was going to stay the same. Now, when I think about this, you think about the threat context getting worse, and you think about how organizations could or should or must respond to this, we could very easily draw a 2x2 matrix. And on the vertical side, say, in this top row here, threat context gets worse or remains the same. In the second row, threat context gets better or less bad. That's a very poor use of English, but that's what we'll go with today. And then on the horizontal axis, we've got in the first column, organizations don't improve their readiness and defenses. And in the second column, organizations do improve their readiness and defenses. Now, if an organization goes, we don't want to do anything, we think we're in a good place, we're just going to leave our security systems where they are. If the threat context gets worse, which is what everyone is saying is going to happen over the next 12 months, then an organization is going to be in a worse position with ineffective defenses. The only way that you can get to the green box of being better protected against threats is, number one, if you improve your readiness and defenses against a range of threats, and also if the threat context gets better. And we've already talked about the predominant view that it is going to get worse. So this is more of a hypothetical situation. We then have two other options on this 2x2 matrix, an orange box and a blue box. And given that the threat context is getting worse, it really comes down to, do you choose the red box or the blue box? If you don't do anything, you're going to be in a worse position as the threat context gets worse. If you do something to improve your readiness and defenses and the threat context gets worse, then how you end up, relatively speaking, depends on the degree to which you invest and how effective that is, and the degree to which the threat context gets worse. I wouldn't want to be in the red box when I look at this. Any thoughts from you on this, Sean?
Yeah, no, it's a super point that's been made here, Michael. The challenge, as I see it, is it's, as you say, it's all relative, and what we've seen in the last few years in particular is how the threats evolve along the wavefront of technology advancement in general in the industry. So the generative AI, I suppose the whole revolution there has really provided incredible impetus and capability to cyber criminals. I mean, if we add that into a generally, let's say, more challenging geopolitical environment, right? There are enormous incentives and easings, so to speak, of barriers for cyber criminals to enact. So, assuming an increasing velocity of change in a bad way for cyber criminal activity is the only safe option, and that's the one that we take right now. Assume it's going to get worse faster, not at the same pace or even less.
Right. Thank you. I'd like to shift now to looking at what we learnt from this research around organizations investing to strengthen cybersecurity posture. We asked a series of 3 questions to understand how organizations were investing over the next 12 months or planning to invest over the next 12 months in 10 areas. The 3 questions assessed their concern with the current posture in each of those 10 areas. The second question assessed the investment required to meet the organization's standard for that area, what they wanted to do. It wasn't an imposed standard. It wasn't in line with a regulation that says, the regulation says you must. It was, as an organization, what is your standard for this, which would of course be informed by regulation and best practice frameworks and so on. And then the third related question was the investment priority in 2025. So we took the answers to the concern question and then we split it into two treatments, those that had high concern for an area versus those that had low concern. We took the investment required answers and we did the same thing for high investment and low investment required to meet the organization's standard. And then finally, we did it for investment priority in 2025 as well, to split it into high priority and low priority. And as you can see here, once you do the combinations, you get 8 options or alternatives or alternative pathways or patterns out of this. The most common one was organizations saying we are highly concerned, there is high investment required, and it's high priority for us. And so slightly over half of, not half, that's not half, 34 is a third, slightly over a third of respondents and organizations said that was the pattern for any of the given areas that we asked about. The second most common was low concern, low investment, and low priority at 16.2%. Third was high concern, low investment, high priority, 11.2%. And then finally, low concern, low investment, and high priority at 10.4%. Now, let's see if we can just explain what that means using some English rather than high, 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 or low, low, low. For me, high, 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 high concern. We are really concerned about this. High investment required and high priority. This describes a laggard that's playing catch up. It's an area that is under-addressed. It's at high risk of compromise. And if you look at 2 of the items that scored very high for that pattern, protecting against AI-enhanced attacks, 48.8% on average, and then protecting against deepfake attacks, 36.9%. If you look at the second pattern, low, 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 risk-tolerant leaders, what that means is that you've got 16.2% of respondents to the survey saying, we've done the work, we're happy with the effectiveness of our protections, and it is of low priority to us to invest any more in this. One of the examples was protecting against BEC attacks. 20% of respondents fitted into the risk-tolerant leadership category for this. Risk-averse followers are those that say we are highly concerned, it's low investment required, but it's high priority for us. And so this is the group that hasn't yet done all of the work that is required, and so they are playing catch up, but not to the same degree as a laggard. And then you have your risk-averse leaders that have low concern, low investment required, but it is still high priority for them, and they do not want to fall behind. When we look at the combination of the patterns overall, this is what it looks like, and I would also point you to the white paper to have a look at this with a bit more time than I'll be able to put this on the screen for today. You can see in the first 2 places we've got new and emerging threat types, protecting against AI-enhanced attacks and protecting against attacks that use deepfake audio or video. And then in positions 3, 4, and 5, we've got enduring threat types, phishing, account takeover, data exfiltration. Now, it's always interesting to look at how this data compares to the other things that we have learnt in the survey or the other data points. And if we just look at the enduring threat types, protecting against phishing threats, it's no surprise that this is so highly rated. This was in 3rd place. Credentials compromised through a phishing attack was the most common incident type that we reported based on the survey data several slides ago. Credentials compromised through a QR code phishing attack was the 4th most common incident type among organizations that we uncovered in this research. The second investment priority was protecting against account takeover threats, and you've got that same most common incident type of credentials compromised through phishing as the most common one, and then you've also got credentials compromised through QR code as well. So both of those are, we get your credentials, we take your account over, and we use it for nefarious purposes. Preventing exfiltration of data for use in extortion. The second most common incident type that we talked about several slides ago was the breach of sensitive employee data. Anything here stand out to you, Sean?
Yeah, Michael, it's first of all, I couldn't agree more with these points, right? This is where the action is at, and they're enduring threats because they're so successful as techniques from a cybersecurity perspective. I think depending on your organization focus, customer data breaches are often as painful or more painful depending on your point of view. But employee breaches are often really a stepping stone to the next stage of more phishing, more account takeover, more business email compromise, and then really, the world's your oyster. In fact, as a cyber criminal at that point, so they're heavily interrelated, and need to be taken very seriously as a chain attack vector.
Yes, yes, and while I've only put sensitive employee data on here, the incident type of customer data is also in our research data. So yeah, absolutely to your point, Sean, the customer one is of significant concern, particularly the Oracle one that you've talked about. I think you said 145,000 people. Some of the others that are in the millions or hundreds of millions. Very, very damaging for organizations. We did a deep dive on a series of key threats against email. So one of those was around BEC attacks, and look, there's a whole lot of numbers on the slide, and I'm not going to have the opportunity to talk through all of these. I think the key point with BEC is that they are low volume attacks that do not include weaponized links or attachment, and compromised accounts are often used as a way of getting access to funds. The 2.9 billion and the 21,489, that is data from the FBI in their most recent Internet Crimes Report, based on 21,489 reported incidents of BEC attacks to the FBI. That there was a net cost of $2.9 billion, which made it the second most expensive crime type that the FBI tracks. It used to be in first place. It has taken second place to investment scams. In the research data, 12.9% of respondents said that they had experienced a BEC incident in the previous 12 months. What else have we got here? 4.9 million was a amount that was transferred to a threat actor's bank account based on a compromised account. The 56.3, that's an interesting data point I've come across recently. It's from an insurance company that says that 56.3% of the claims volume that they paid out in the most recent financial year was based on attacks that started in the inbox, with business email compromise being one and funds transfer fraud being the second. And so, as Sean mentioned earlier, around threat actors often pivoting away from ransomware and all of the flow-on headaches that are involved for a threat actor before they get a financial payout, both business email compromise and funds transfer fraud provide a much quicker way of getting access to funds. Phishing attacks was another type of email security threat that we looked at. Let's pick a couple of items out of here. Sean and his team looked at their data from across their customer database, and found that gmail.com, outlook.com, hotmail.com, and others were the most commonly used domains for phishing email. And of course, it's very difficult to just go, we'll block everything coming from Gmail or outlook.com, because for many organizations, that's where their customers are as well. And so you can't do a rule that says block all of this. It's nuance. It's what are the patterns that are happening here? How do we understand this? 61.9% of respondents to the survey expected attacks that seek to compromise credentials would increase in threat level over the coming 12 months. 64.3% had the same view in terms of increasing threat levels of phishing. MFA bypass is a capability that is increasingly built into phishing toolkits, and so has become a option or a design element of so many different phishing attacks now. And finally, I said we would talk about AI a bit more in today. AI-enabled phishing is something that we are seeing happening as threat actors are able to use generative AI to create targeted phishing messages in, say, 5 minutes, rather than taking several hours to craft one campaign. And that order of magnitude increase in velocity to be able to create targeted, customized phishing attacks is a particularly worrying sign for the industry. QR code phishing, 20.9% of respondents to the survey said that they had seen this type of attack against their organization. It's very common in the design that the threat actors want someone to pull their mobile phone out, take a snap of the QR code, and then engage with the content on their mobile device, which are often less protected than corporate devices that email may have come into initially. And also, because the screen size is much smaller, has so many fewer capabilities of signaling the threats that are involved. 51.6% of respondents in the survey anticipated that the threat level of these attacks will increase over the next 12 months, and some portion also expected that the threat level would stay the same. Deepfakes was another area that we talked about. Arup in 2024 lost $25 million to a deepfake video meeting. 56%, this is the Coalition Insurance data point, of attacks beginning in the email inbox. And they talk about impersonation in general, not just deepfakes, but impersonation in general being a key driver for that. And the leveraging of deepfake technologies will only increase this going forward in terms of the threat level. The 3 seconds is the amount of audio that's needed to create a voice clone in 2024, 2025 versus 20 minutes just several years ago. So there's a whole lot of stuff happening in deepfakes, and we haven't yet seen the end of what this is going to mean for organizations. Generative AI, 61.5% of respondents to the survey anticipated that the threat level exhibited by generative AI used by cyber criminals would increase over the next 12 months, and some portion expected it to remain the same. In a different question, we asked respondents to indicate what impacts generative AI had on their threat posture, or not their threat posture, the ability of cyber criminals to drive threat against them. Sophistication was in first place, volume was in second, the uniqueness of the attacks was in third place. And here's that 5 minutes, which I've already told you about, which is the estimation of how much more quickly someone is able to create a targeted phishing message or other type of threat based on the use of generative AI compared to several hours. One of the things that you'll find in the report, and when you get access to that over the next couple of days, and I would encourage you to look through that, is 12 trends that TitanHQ has seen in its data based on its analysis over the last 12 months. I've just pulled out 3 of those here, and they really amplify some of the things that we've talked about already. Number 1 was around social engineering phishing emails being the number 1 threat vector seen by TitanHQ for all types of attacks. The second is the traditional malicious emails that include weaponized URLs are declining in popularity among threat actors, given that many organizations have improved and stepped up their email security posture to identify weaponized URLs. As Sean said much earlier in this webinar, there's been a pivot, a change, because as threat actors see what's going on, they then change it in response and come up with different types of attacks that hit organizations where they have lower levels of protection. And then finally, overall and in general, that end users offer an additional layer of defense, making any email security system better. An end user that is able to detect and see that something is off is of tremendous value to an organization. Sean, this was based on your data. Is there anything you want to talk about on this or some of the other slides that we've just talked about?
No, I could talk about it all day long. Michael, to be honest. But I suppose, first of all, it's been really interesting to see what the data has brought back as we kind of looked more closely at the trends over time. And again, wonderfully summarized in the report, so recommended from a reading perspective. Lots to learn there. I would certainly, one thing that's been kind of top of mind for me as we think about, our own product roadmap and how things are evolving, and really the why is so important, right? And we both mentioned it, but I wanted to come back a little bit more on the why here, which is when we think about why social engineering, right? So there's been an increasing maturity generally in the industry around other aspects that make ransomware attacks harder. So having a great backup strategy, hugely important backstop to devalue a ransomware attack, much more commonly implemented by businesses of all scales now, and rightly so, because it's a really great strategy to adopt, right? The just general security posture associated with that space, the general hardening, patching, these things have become much more automated, and even in some respects tied back to AI strategies as well. So all of a sudden, I think what's happening for the cyber criminals is when they do finally compromise through social engineering, through phishing, through QR code, they're really surveying the environment they're landing in and looking at, is this a pretty well hardened environment? If so, social engineering is a great way, because it's the and I think that's where, from our perspective, the future, and it's an ongoing important pillar anyway, is how do you continue to harden your strategy in your company, your culture of security with each of your staff members, with your organization, because that's at least as important security layer to consider.
Thank you. And, Sean, it's really good that you talk about that, because the next thing we're going to be talking about is email security strategy, including the role of people. Let's begin by talking about the centrality of AI. We asked respondents to indicate their agreement or the importance of these different strategies over the next 12 months. You can see that the highest rated one was email security solutions that include defensive AI capabilities was very important and extremely important to, it's just around 4 out of 5 organizations already saying that. In second place, using AI to analyze employee behavior for creating targeted phishing simulations was in second, and third was around automating the creation of reports on new threats for email security administrators to review or investigate or action. And then in fourth place was using AI to create normal baselines of employee communication behaviors for use in detecting sophisticated email security threats. And it's really that last one around normal baselines that is the underlying technology that enables everything else to work. We've moved away from the reliance on seeking to detect malicious attachments or weaponized URLs or post-delivery weaponization of URLs. And we're now looking at whether this person normally communicates with the person that they've just received a message from, or whether the tone is the same, or whether the content is what would normally be expressed. And it's the analysis of those different signals that now allows modern email security defenses to say, there's something off here, and you need to pay more attention to this. We asked around the importance of technical protections for organizations, and 93% of respondents said that email presents an ever-changing threat requiring constant vigilance and up-to-date solutions for them. Interestingly, 89% said that Exchange Online Protection, the basic native by default capability in Microsoft 365, that every organization using Exchange Online gets, actually offered sufficient protection for them. But when we pressed them, 98% of that 89% actually relied on additional solutions beyond EOP. So whereas 89% said, yeah, EOP is fine by itself and that's all we need, actually in reality, almost every organization is relying on a multiple level approach to email security, for the very simple reason that EOP doesn't stop everything. And there are very dangerous attacks, very costly attacks that still get through to end users if it is only EOP that is being relied on. We asked around human risk management strategies, and you can see here a range of emphasis points, starting with training end users to identify cyber threats in whatever form they take and whatever channel they compromise. In second place was strengthening email security protection so that email is a safe and secure channel for communication and collaboration. And I think it's really good that the emphasis is the way that it is, that it's a generalized attempt to create threat-aware, security-competent end users, not just in email, but in everything that they're using, in every interaction that they're involved in, because that's the reality of modern organizations and cybersecurity and physical security as well. You know, if we see something that's strange on our shop floor, in our factory, in our office, we need the threat awareness to be able to say, there's something happening here. And so anything that organizations can do to create and curate those kind of people is essential. We asked around the importance of different training strategies, and I'm not going to read through all of these. You can have a look at it in the white paper, but the overall sentiment that you'll get from looking at this is that there's an emphasis on a combination of both training for awareness, plus also the use of scenarios and simulations as a way of assessing how well people in an organization are threat aware and security conscious, so that any follow-on mitigations can be embraced to strengthen those protections. So it's not just technical, it's also about having people that can see what's going on, and you know that they're able to see what's going on. We asked around purchase factors for email security, and here's the top 6. I think in the survey it was something like 12 to 13 different factors that we asked about. This slide in PowerPoint for our purposes in this webinar today isn't big enough to show you all of them, so please do have a look at the white paper. But if you look at the 3 in first place, we've got effectiveness against email security threats in first place. We've got that the solution includes both phishing prevention and end user behavior improvement in second. And then in third place, we've got measurability of improvements. So this is about, can we prove that what we have in place is stopping the threats that we need to stop? And do we also have users that are able to detect and see the things that are strange and anomalous, and then take appropriate action to that? Now, Sean and I realize that we have spoken very quickly through a whole lot of data in the time that we've had together today. I'm going to give you a conclusion, and then we're going to go to Q&A, and Sean or Trevor is going to moderate that. But I do want to thank you for your attention today and the opportunity to present this latest research with TitanHQ. Please do get a copy of that report as soon as you can. The overall conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, is that strengthening email security against intensifying risks is absolutely essential for your organization. The threats against email are already bad and are expected to get worse over the coming 12 months. Mitigate the changing threat dynamics with a holistic email security strategy that includes both a multi-level technical series of protections as well as improved human risk management. And the question that I would ask you to contemplate as this webinar draws to a conclusion after Q&A is, what is your plan of action to strengthen email security in 2025? And with that, Sean, I'm going to hand back to you and Treva for Q&A.
Okay, great. Treva, over to you. I'm sure there's been a few questions flowing in over the course of the webinar.
Absolutely, Michael, Sean, thanks a million. It's great to see the research findings. You can see so much work has gone into this. So incredible to see the findings and trends. And as Michael mentioned, make sure you get your hands on the report. It's going to be a good one. So yeah, I have some questions here. Any that I don't get to today, we will reach out to you directly. So I will get started. Okay, so the first one here, it was mentioned that majority of respondents use a multi-layered approach to email security, but why do you need to supplement Microsoft 365?
Great question. Well, I'll take that one to start with anyway. I mean, it's a key question, and I mean, Michael, you even just spoke to it in terms of the survey results there, and an interesting paradox of most people saying they thought that Microsoft's base offering was good enough, and then, but yes, actually, not maybe not, or taking other measures. But I think there's, for me, and I think when I think about our customers and what their needs are, Microsoft does provide varying needs of protection, or varying degrees rather, depending on, your licensing levels. And but there's a couple of key considerations above and beyond that. So the first one is, and it's the core of every good cybersecurity strategy, is defense in depth. Okay, so core principle, and put it another way, you don't want to really put all your eggs in one basket, right? I would say that in regard of any vendor, really. I mean, Microsoft have been in the news themselves in the last year or so for security issues, and don't like to call it out because you never know when it's going to be something you have to deal with yourself. But the reality is that they represent a huge opportunity for attackers given the breadth of their install base. January last year, January 24, some Russian hackers, Midnight Blizzard, got access to corporate email systems from Microsoft using password spraying techniques. Now, that's an important and unfortunately quite a large red flag, because it meant in order to be successful, they had to uncover at least some Microsoft corporate email accounts that were not using MFA, right? And this is the company that we I mean, we're all part of the Microsoft ecosystem. We have to recognize that, right? So I think that that's just a recent example. There are more, unfortunately. So having multiple layers of defense is the best option, right? The stakes are high, as Michael's already outlined, and the survey certainly backs that up. That's why we recommend, using an ICS and SEG option to actually provide the best possible security with Microsoft 365. And of course, the other thing, and this is speaking, from the point of view of TitanHQ, is the actual capability to detect these rare and difficult threats. As again was pointed out, they're not frequent, so spotting them is even harder as a result. So we add a lot of value on top of M365, right? The simple answer is that we're tracking our performance across multiple M365 license levels, and we catch stuff all the time, every day, on top of what Microsoft does. And that's part of that defense in depth perspective, right? So that's how we add the value, and that's really why you need to supplement Microsoft 365.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I guess just at a high level, I would add again and repeat again that Microsoft 365 by itself doesn't catch everything that comes through. It misses attacks that end up in the inbox. And that the finding that was shared in the research data today, that 98% of respondents were supplementing Exchange Online Protection with something else, is not a unique finding to this research only. It's something that we see consistently. Whenever we ask this question, we see a very, very high percentage of organizations going, yes, we use something else as well, because Exchange Online Protection by itself, Microsoft 365's email security capabilities by themselves do not protect us well enough.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Keeping on that topic, what else makes sense to consider when thinking about your overall email security posture, and what are the biggest synergies?
Oh, great question, actually. To whoever asked that, it's a really important point, right? I mean, so thanks for that one, Treva. I think about this a lot, and for the most part, it's in some respects very straightforward. I mean, we've already talked quite a bit about human risk management, and SAT in particular. It's such a crucial pillar of organizational security. Culture that's high on caution and care when dealing with emails, where you have a well-educated and well-tested organization, well-tested staff, will always be much more resilient to any attack vectors, right? And actually, I'd add educating your staff to take the same precautions with their personal technology footprint is also a key component of that strategy. In addition, I'd say archival and backup, hugely synergistic, right? your company infrastructure in general is kind of always going to be part of your critical measures. But generally, essentially, when I think of our own security posture, we want to have the strongest measures at every level and every possible level to provide the best overall outcome. And the metaphor that comes to mind here really is think about your cybersecurity architecture like Kevlar, right? It's not one big thick wall that keeps you safe, right? It's multiple woven layers, just like body armor dissipates the force of a bullet, right? God forbid you find yourself in that situation. Our defense in depth model and the way we think about this ensures that even if a threat breaches one layer, and you have to allow for that it gets stopped or at least slowed by the next. So you're really controlling your environment by having lots of layers working together to ensure the best possible outcome. Nothing can get you that way.
Yeah, I agree with all that, Sean. The one thing that I'll add and just call out, and I'm sure if we had more time, it was something that you would have spoken to as well, is just the whole question around identity security, given that if you can compromise credentials to an email account, given that they are often platform plays with Google Workspace or Microsoft 365, you get access to everything that employee has access to. So multi-factor authentication, passwordless, some of the moves towards biometric devices, some of the investments around identity security posture to be able to see what's going on and what's not going well so that you know where to turn the dials to strengthen things would be something else that I would say is essential for organizations.
Couldn't agree more. Very important point, Michael, and definitely something we've invested in very heavily in our own security posture, so I couldn't agree more.
Excellent. Good.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. We'll just do one last question because I'm very conscious of time. So I've got one here and it says, it was mentioned that laggards are most concerned with AI-based deepfake attacks. How real is the deepfake threat for SMBs, and is this type of advanced attack a real threat for small businesses?
Yeah, well, another good question, right? I mean, sometimes, and I think you referenced that now infamous attack, Michael, and are up the 25 million payday for those criminals who clearly put a lot of effort in. I mean, creating essentially a generative AI based video call to convince someone to divert a major payment was, the stuff of sci-fi, frankly, right? In some respects, but it's not anymore, right? But the reality now of generative AI and email security, it's been upon us for probably the guts of 18 months or more at this point. So with the advent of freely available open source large language models, right, such as, and these are actually specifically trained for criminal activity, such as Fraud GPT, great branding there, and Worm GPT, right? The barriers to generating really high quality phishing emails are very low, right? Just a little bit of supplementary information, right? Often freely available through company websites, through LinkedIn, etc., can give an immensely targeted phishing email. And for those that can't even be bothered with going the open source route, I mean, DeepSeek, very unfortunately, is pretty easy to jailbreak for the same purposes and is an incredibly powerful, large language model platform. So the first wave of deepfakes are already hitting and have been for a while now and provide a significant challenge to the industry. So it's a live and real threat in the present day. I think that, the next generation has already started, as you mentioned, Michael, like short clips of audio. I hope you all appreciate the risk we're taking by having this recorded. But it's a real threat, and the thing with this stuff is that it starts at the top. The biggest companies like the Arabs, are targeted first, but invariably it trickles down, right? And the innovativeness of criminals, unfortunately, will see these techniques, needing attention soon and become very, very common.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. I guess the thing that I'd add to that is that we really just don't know yet to what extent deepfake attacks are going to be a real threat against small and medium-sized businesses. All of the indications are that it could get very bad very quickly. And I mean, you talked about the increasingly complex geopolitical environment that we exist in at the moment with misinformation and disinformation as well that is just rampant across social media. And all of that is a class of threat that undermines our ability to assess what is true and what is valid. And if there is a continuation of this as a threat type, if disinformation, misinformation, other forms of impersonation keep happening, this could go really bad, really, really fast, but we just don't know yet to what extent that is going to happen. We are, of course, paying as much attention as we can and putting as much guardrails in as we possibly can from a research perspective for Osterman Research, and I'm sure Sean from a technical point of view for TitanHQ, but yeah, we just don't know yet.
Brilliant, great answers. Sean, Michael, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. We'll wrap up there. Apologies to anyone that has a question unanswered. We will contact you directly with any questions. And if you do have any questions for Michael or Sean, please reach out to us. I'm sure they'll be very happy to answer. So just before we wrap up, just to let you know that you'll receive the report. You'll be the first people to receive the report, which is very exciting. So you receive that within 48 hours. And we have a little survey at the end. So if you just take 30 seconds to answer, just let us know what you thought. And yeah, that's it for today. Thank you all so much for joining. And we look forward to seeing you in our next webinar. Thanks, everybody.